Welcome back to the next exciting installment of Derech Hashem with me, Rabbi Mordechai Goodman, on behalf of Jewish Education in Manchester and Site or Kasher, who's asked me to go through Derech Hashem with you. By now you should know the drill if you're this far in. But if you're not, we're going through this book, which is the quintessential handbook of Jewish philosophy. Go back to number 1 to get the intro as to what's going on. What are we going to do today? I hear you cry. And the answer is we're going to do some very interesting stuff today. We're going to talk about the concept, cheerily, of death and the resurrection. Why is death necessary? Why do we need to get resurrected? What's happening? Why was man decided to die? In fact, as we'll learn, we've already learned, man was designed to be an immortal creature. From a genetic point of view, that makes a lot of sense. You see, apoptosis, which is pre-programmed cell death, happens in a very organized manner. It's a code which was written in. God said to Adam, you're an immortal being. The day you eat of the Eitz Torah, you will die. What does that mean? I will re-encode your genetics to become a mortal being, which means I have to do something active to damage you, and I don't want to do that. So just don't eat of it. He wasn't meant to die. There's no point of him dying. So we're going to talk about this idea. Now, what did we leave off last time? We talked about the 2 balls of plasticine, the black ball and the white ball. And when Adam sinned, he squidged them together to make generally a grey ball with a little bit of black and a little bit of white at the edges. Let's say the black is the don't do's and the whites are the do-do's, right? So like evil things versus good things. Don't eat the Eitz Torah would be evil. It'd be something to avoid, right? Do look after the garden and everything that else God told him to do, he's got to do. Yeah, the 6 Adamic laws that he had, according to the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, Perek Yud, Halacha Aleph through Gimel. You'll find that. That's where it talks about the 6 Adamic laws became the 7 Noahide laws when Noah got the 7th one, which is not to do any animal cruelty, not to sever the limb of an animal, which is essentially all animal cruelty laws. That was because animals were given over to his remit after the whole thing with the flood. Adam didn't have that because animals weren't in his remit. So there were the 6 Adamic laws which he had to keep. So he knew what he had to do. God said to him, you see that tree over there? Don't eat of it. There was no riddle. We aren't in such a fortunate position. Now that he's sinned, he's merged the black and the white into a grey. That's what we did last time. And now we have 2 jobs to do. He doubled our workload. One is we have to isolate and ascertain what is correct. What's the halacha? What's the law? Then we have to comply. And we've still got to have a yetzer hara, a desire, a pull to do evil, not to do the law. So someone comes up and says, like, that I've got some milk on the side of my pot. Is the pot kosher? Is the food inside kosher? You have to figure that out. Once you've ascertained the food inside is kosher, let's say, but the pot isn't, the pot needs hagala, the pot needs dipping and abluting in order to bring it back to a status of being kosher, you might be, I can't be bothered. I just couldn't be bothered. I don't want to do it. I've got other things to do with my day and I'm busy and someone else has called, and that's a problem. You're not going to comply now that you know. But you have double the workload. One is you have to find out, do I have to kosher the pot? Do I have to do anything to fix up the pot? I don't even know. And 2 is then I've got to do it. Adam didn't have the first one. Adam knew what he had to do. Clearly, don't eat of that fruit from that tree that you know about. I'm telling you which one it is. It's clear. He just had the desire to eat of it, and he had to overcome that. We have double. We've got the desire not to comply, and we don't even know what we've got to comply with. We've got a double workload. That's what it means at the end of page 51.8, which is where we left last time, which is section 1, chapter 3.8, which is where we got to, is that he doubled our workload. The effort required to earn perfection was therefore doubled. That's what that means. Now, he did eat of it, and he did make things bad. I'm going off, come with me, it'll be fun, come back. I fix and restore guitars. I'm also a music teacher, and I also can value guitars for auction. I can see when some guitars have been made out to look older than they are, but sometimes the people that don't know buy them thinking they're from the 1960s or 1970s, and they're not. They've actually been made recently. And you can see there's certain tricks that people use when they try to make fakes. I'm not talking about relicking, which is trying to artificially make it on. I'm saying when someone really goes about trying to forge a thing. Sometimes people bring me a guitar and they say, please will you restore it to its former glory? It's been very used and I want it back like in almost new condition. Guitars are not like violins, by the way. Violins are designed to be taken apart and put back together again. Electric guitars, and probably acoustic guitars actually as well, are not. They don't want to be taken apart. And taking them apart and putting them back again There's all kinds of problems that come up, which is even harder than building them from scratch in some ways. Now, the way that you restore an instrument, be it an oven, be it a trumpet, be it, a couch, the best thing you can do to really restore something is to break it apart entirely, clean and fix every individual component that has a problem, and then carefully put it back together again. It's not so good just to take like a can of Pledge or whatever wood spray, that you would use, like polish and a cloth, and just give it a quick buffing and go, there you go. That's not good enough. It's not really going to do the job. Real restoration means disassembly, fixing and cleaning, and then correct reassembly. And when you do that, often problems come up with guitars that when you reassemble it, a new thing happens. You end up chasing one problem after another, which it can happen like that. That's the only way to do it. If you're going to do a job well, do it well. That's just how you're going to have to do it. Okay, that's the mashal. That's the analogy. Let's come back now to the nimshal. Why am I telling you this? When Adam sinned, he caused an increase, as we learned, of evil in both himself and the world at large. The world at large became engrossed in evil because now it needs to be at a lower level for his new lower level of Bechira, as we discussed. I think I discussed the fact that Eve gave some of the Eitzadas Tov V'Ra to eat to all the animals. And they willingly, except for one creature, accepted it. And the idea is the animals are now higher than humans. So they needed to go back to where they are so that they can work correctly in the design that they've been made for, to organize a world biosphere for humans to be able to operate in. So they understood that they also needed to go down a level. Now that everything's been sunken down a level, it's become degraded. I told you originally there'd be hot buns growing off of the wheat plant. That's exactly what you need. Just pluck it off. There's your bread. Now we've got all these stages such as ploughing, sowing, reaping, threshing, winnowing, sorting, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking, just to get what will be normally pulled straight off of the wheat, right? It's a lot of work, That's what evil does. It distances you from an objective. Now that Adam himself has become sullied and the world has become sullied, we have a problem. We said earlier that the perfect good that God has got in mind to give us is himself, because nothing else could be better. That we already stated. He's the ultimate thing that he can give. We discussed that. We said that black and white. The ultimate thing that he wants to give is himself, because he doesn't come with any deficiency. He doesn't run out. The feeling doesn't pass in a second or two. It is an eternal level of pleasure that you can get from him. Problem. There can't be a drop of evil in Olam Haba, in the world to come, which is this world remade without the evil in. Because evil is, number one, the thing which God has created to distance himself from you for Bechira, free will purposes. And number two, it would ruin the reward of the righteous if you would allow evil into that domain. Those are the two conclusions we drew when we talked about this idea. Okay. Problem. Man and the world now have evil embedded, because man brought the evil into himself by eating it. Notice the highest thing you can do to control a substance is to eat it. You can't control anything more than by eating something. Which is why eating disorders are really to do with control. To control one's body. Very important idea. That's the idea of kashrus as well. The dietary laws is control over what you take most intimately within you. It actually breaks down and becomes part of your body. The proteins, the fats, the carbohydrates, the sugar, they're used by the body as building blocks for your body. He ate of this stuff. It became part of him. The only way we can clean up his body and soul, which have become sullied through this act. The soul became sullied because it wasn't able to elevate the body. It did not fulfill its task, as we're going to learn in the next couple of pages. That's the task of the soul. The body became sullied because it ingested something which was specifically, quote unquote, poisonous for it. Very poisonous. It caused it mortality, and it was meant to be immortal. How are you going to clean body and soul? Answer, you have to separate them. Just like you have to break apart a good guitar. Sometimes you have to take the neck off of a guitar and fix up the problems with the neck and the body, you go see YouTube videos all about that, called a neck reset on an acoustic, on an electric. It's usually easy if it's screwed on, but it can sometimes be glued on, or it's very, very, very problematic to take the neck off of a guitar. And you have to sort that out before bringing the neck and body back together again, aligning it correctly, calibrating it, and getting a great working instrument. What we've got to do here is the same thing. We've got to separate body and soul, clean each one. But the only reason we're cleaning it, like you take an item to the dry cleaners, is because you want to reuse it. The body and the soul have to be rejoined. We have to be body and soul joined. We're going to say this in the next chapter on page 63. Page 63, which is in section 1, chapter 4, points 2 and 3. We're going to see that this is absolutely vital, that body and soul have to be joined for Olam Haba. The reason is like this. When we do mitzvahs or avos, when we fulfill the commandments or do sins, we do so as body and soul joined. As we are now, is how we're doing them. The reward that God must give us to be ultimately perfect must be body and soul joined. He's got to give your body pleasure, he's got to give your soul pleasure, and he's got to do it in such a way that they're together in one matrix. You have to have that together. Otherwise, it would be an imperfect reward. Heaven, for us, is not walking around with harps and halos in some kind of spiritual domain. The reward cannot be just spiritual. The reward cannot be just physical. It has to be a co-physical, spiritual reward, just like everything we're doing now, according to Jewish thought, is co-spiritual and physical. Everything physical is rooted in something spiritual, which is manifesting it in this dimension. So that's why in Judaism, we're never asked to directly interface with anything spiritual ever. And in fact, we're prohibited from contacting the dead or asking the dead questions or talking to ghosts and spirits. We don't do any of that. It is absolutely treif. It's completely, what the Arabs would say haram. You know what I mean? It's like absolutely treif. We don't do that. Why? God doesn't want us to involve. If you want to involve yourself in spirituality, move physicality around correctly. Physicality is a key to spirituality. Buddhism would say you have to completely check out of physicality. Jains won't even wear clothes because the feel of the garment against the skin is trapping you into the physical world. And what they want is to elevate themselves up to a more spiritual domain, which is much better than this one. And you can't get out of this one unless you let go and relinquish it. We say completely the opposite. That's nonsense, according to Judaism. The only way you can get close to Hashem is to utilize the physical world the way that he has legislated, because that in and of itself is what we're being asked to shuffle about. Like a miner has to dig for gold. You're going to have to dig a lot of rock. Eventually you'll get gold, but it's in the rock. But you're going to have to shuffle around a lot of physicality to do it. That's just the way it is. God has embedded that fine material of the mitzvah deeply within the physical world. But everything in the physical world is inherently dark and coarse. But we can utilize it correctly. And that's how we elevate it. That's absolutely key Jewish thought. Now, because we've moved around all these mitzvahs with physical things, we've also got to get it. Jewish idea. We put on tefillin in the morning. We lay phylacteries, which is these black boxes with straps. So we put them on, and we put them on our head and on our arm. So your soul gets a tremendous boost out of that. It's a very mystically powerful thing to do. But I got news for you. You can't do that without an arm and a head. After 120, your arm and a head have very good claim to say, it's all very nice that you wanted to put tefillin on. What about me? Excuse me, you're going to need one of these, aren't you? Yeah, that's right. Your arm has to get reward. Your head has to get reward. If God would just pay your soul and not your body, he would be shortchanging you. He's got to do both. Which means even though I've got to separate both to clean body and soul from the evil that Adam originally put in there and additional stuff we've put in there, the only point is that I've got to rejoin it. This is the idea of resurrection, Techias HaMesim, which is well known across all Jews and many other religions. And the idea is to bring body and soul back so that I can bring back that body and soul so that it can get judged and rewarded in the actual manner in which it did the mitzvahs or avos it earned the money to start with. Does this make sense? Let's see it inside. Page 51, section 1, chapter 3.9. If you're utilizing this book, it's page 51. Otherwise, if you're utilizing some online copy or anything, it is section 1, chapter 3.9. Justice decreed that neither man nor the world will ever be able to rise to perfection while still in their current fallen state. That's because we're dealing with evil. And you can't have a perfect world with evil in it. Evil is the stuff which makes it imperfect. Because they remain, body and world and soul, in this spoiled, non-ideal condition, which now is necessary to allow Bechira, free will, volition to exist so that we can earn more reward. And evil in the meantime has increased from what Adam did because his children have been doing all kinds of evil since. Both humans and the world must go through a stage of disassembly before either humans or the world can arrive at perfection. Man must therefore die. That was the decree of death. And everything else that was corrupted with him, the physical world that we live in, must also perish. Now, we haven't kind of obliquely alluded to this. If you go back to page 39, top of the page, section 1, chapter 2, end of point 1, we said that the purpose of all that was created was to bring into existence a creature who could derive pleasure from God's own good in a way that would be possible for it. We said the purpose of all that was created, that includes tuna and vultures and giant squid and lemons and comets and black holes. Everything that was made, remember we did the blue-orange, when you made gravity and friction and dimension and the colour blue and an orange, that was all there so that you could bring the blue-orange into existence. Man was the reason that the universe was created. That's the whole point. It's a framework. It's an examination room for man. Now that man has sullied that, you got to clean it up. It's got to be cleaned because we need it. We still need it now as the reward center. So it can't be in this way. It can't be the laws of nature and the environment will have to change to show and reflect that change. The soul cannot purify the body, which we're going to learn is its main task, until the body dies and deteriorates, rotting, and a new structure is composed from what? From the remains to have a genetic trigger. It will be regrown from a genetic seed or a source. Our tradition says this is a particular bone in the spine called the Lutz bone. We're not sure whether or not I think it's C1, the atlas vertebrae, which is the first of the vertebrae behind the skull, or whether it's the coccyx, which is the little tailbone in the sacrum, which is right at the back. Either which way, it's a very dense, tough bone, which will have some genetic material, and from there, we will be utilized as a genetic starter material for recloning. Yes, I said that. That's right. According to the Rambam, that's how it'll happen. Very interesting. Bases it on a pasuk in Eov. But anyway, the point is that we need a body again. But the body has to rot to release the evil that has become attached to it. The way that it cleans up is through the rotting process. The powers of the fungus and the maggots and the bacteria that break down the body. That is the cleansing process that's required. And a new structure has to be composed from that seeded genetic material. And then the soul can enter and purify that. Because remember, it's all about body and soul being together and the soul purifying the body. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute. The entire world must likewise be destroyed or disassembled and cease to exist in its regular present form and must be renewed in a new state worthy of perfection, i.e. without evil in it. So this is a Jewish calendric idea. There's approximately 6,000 years from Adam's birthday, and we're now past 5,780 years from that. Okay, it's a long time in, which means if you take each 1,000 years as a day, we're like Friday afternoon. So basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Adam to come for Shabbos. He messed up, so come for next Shabbos. The thing is that we know one divine day is 1,000 earth years. We learn that out from various places, in Tehillim, in Psalms, for instance. So we know that as a tradition. So there's 1,000 earth years for one divine day. So really, we're just Friday afternoon. 6,000 is the end of Friday. 6,000 to 7,000 will be like the Sabbath. Everything's calm. And then from 6,000 to 7,000, from 7,000 onwards, so is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6,000 to 7,000 Shabbos. Past that, that's the beginning of Olam Haba. which means the earth, going through like a sabbatical cycle really, a Shemitah, the earth itself will have to be not ploughed as it were, it has to be lying fallow, allowing evil to seep out of it. Then it can be rebuilt and carries on in a new way. Now in that particular place it has to go on forever, because as we said, getting close to God needs an infinite place to do that. You can't get close to infinity in a finite domain. We'll discuss that as well more as we go to it. But the point is as follows. Body and soul have to be removed, restored, cleaned, put back together. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a perfect giving. And God's got to give a perfect giving because he's perfect. He's deficiency-less. He can't do anything that's bad. So fine. So now Adam has done something that's bad. He was stricken with mortality. God said, if you eat of that, I'll strike you with mortality. And he did. And he became mortal. But that's not the way I originally want you. I want you to be mortal. You wouldn't become mortal unless you mess up. Had he not have sinned, he'd have entered Olam Haba alive that first day that he was created. No problem at all. But now that he did, he has to take an extra week out. Notice it says, the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Adam lived to 930 years. He gave 70 years of his life to David, King David, because he was meant to die 3 hours after birth. So he granted him 70 years from his own life as a forwarding of contract. He had a contract signed by witnesses. He got witnesses to do it. Amazing. A whole Medrash Rabbah about that. When the day came, 930 years later for him to die, he rejected it. He goes, no, I've still got another 70 years. He goes, we still got a contract here. What do we learn out from that? Even if you sign off on the day of your death, you'll never accept it when it happens. Adam didn't. So when he says, the day you eat of it, you shall surely die, God was talking about one of his days, not one of... That's 1,000 years. You got a day. He's 930 minus 70 because you're going to give that to David. But if I can show you want to do that, you can do that. You can sign it off if you want. I'll honour that if you want. That's down to you. But I'm giving you 1,000 years. That's an interesting idea. But now it means that something immortal has lost the ultimate thing it had, which is its immortality. It's become mortal. Got to come back. It has to be back the way it needs to be. Otherwise, the system will be faulty. It was therefore decreed that man should die and then be brought back to life. That's not reincarnated. That is resurrected from the same body material. This is the concept of Techias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. The entire world must similarly be destroyed and then renewed. This is the meaning of what our sages taught us. 6,000 years will the world exist, and for 1,000 it will be desolate. That 6,000 is not absolutely dead on. It is around 6,000. We always round numbers down. It's slightly more than that. If you actually, there's a tradition as to exactly what the years are, but that doesn't mean you're doing that now. But we're talking about the idea of around about 6,000 years. The source for this is Gemara Sanhedrin, Sadi Zayin, Omid Aleph. That's Sanhedrin 97a. It's it's Amarav, where it says Amarav. Now, at the end of this 1,000 years, God will renew his world. He has to, because there's got to be a domain where you can give the good that he wanted to set aside over. You got to have that. So let's just summate here. Let's just make sure we covered a lot of ground. Yeah. So even though we've only done 1 point, we've covered a lot of conceptual ideas. Let's try to understand what's going on here. Adam doing what he did infused both in himself and the world negativity, because God specifically said, this is the negative I'm putting into it, avoid it. He decided not to avoid it. Okay. So what he's done is he's brought a chemical and adulterated the pristine level of that original chemical with this noxious addition of evil. That has affected everything. Remember where I told you about the idea of or with an ayin versus or with an aleph? Or with an ayin means leather. Or with an aleph means light. We talked about the idea that the body is made now of leather. It's opaque. But originally it was like kind of glassy. The idea of nail. The nail was all through the body. It was transparent. He has made more opaque, more distant, more further away what he originally was, and he's distanced himself from what God wanted. Okay, so you want to take 6,000 years to fix that up, Stanley? Okay, you want to take the long way around? You could have been here today, Okay, I'll see you in 6,000 Earth years. It's another week. Okay, but I'll see you later. Now that's going to be a much harder. That's going to be a much harder run, because now what you've got to do is you've entropied, you've doubled the workload. First of all, you're going to have to identify what's correct. Then you're going to still have to comply. You're going to have to do that for 6,000 years. by separating out that black and white plasticine balls correctly so that they are what they are, that will be part and parcel of the tick and the fixing that you need to do. And then you still have to go through the death process to look forward to. And that's because your body itself has become sullied. You have to allow the body and the soul to be separated, clean the soul, clean the body, bring body and soul back. You have to do that because otherwise the reward that he's going to give would be faulty, because he's not going to give a whole world just for the soul and a whole world just for the body and they just go and get their rewards, because it wouldn't be a complete reward. The body will feel as if it's missing the soul feels as if it's missing the body, because they need each other. It's like milk without a bottle. The soul is only there to elevate a physical animalistic ape. That's its job. The suit it was put in, its job is to elevate. Use the suit for me correctly. So the suit without a neshama is useless, and the neshama without a suit, the guf, is useless. They need each other. So to keep them separate is absolutely banal. You wouldn't think like that. You have to have them together. Okay, so I put them back. But in the meantime, I've got to put them back clean. There's no putting them back dirty, because that dirt will keep them away from what they need. So I've got to restore it. I've got to clean both. That process of restoration is called Techiyas HaMeisim. That's what we call it. That's the idea of the resurrection. That's absolutely necessary, which is why it's one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith. You accept that. In fact, if you don't accept it, your Judaism's in question. Why? Think about it. Why must there be a resurrection? Because then if without the resurrection, God can't actually give the perfect reward. If God can't give the perfect reward, you're causing God to be faulty according to that philosophy, right? That's what the Jewish idea of things. God's not faulty. He's only going to do it the right way. So you don't need to worry. It's got to be that he's going to get it done correctly. If he's going to get it done correctly, he has to bring us back. That's the right way of doing it. That's why he's going to do that. It's an outcome of his perfection. He's not going to fail in what he's going to give you. And that is where we got to now. You've done well. We covered a lot of conceptual ground. That brings us up to the idea of why death was necessary, why the world has to be renewed, why we have to come back, all of that. What we're going to do next time is actually talk about how the reward will be given out, what happens post-resurrection, how that works, and what the soul is going to do while it's separated from the body. We've not discussed that. So I look forward to doing that with you next time. Thanks so much for taking out your time and joining us. And I hope you have a wonderful week. And I'll see you next time.